Hi, I'm Greg Walker, Technical Training Manager with Jacobsen. As our seasons are winding down, we're going to cover a few items you might want to look at during your winter service program. Although this list will not be all-inclusive, it will give you some basics of what you need to cover. So let's get started on the front end of the machine. So we're going to start with the reels. Items to look at on the reels would be, of course, our rollers. We want to check for up and down play, side-to-side movement of the rollers to let us know if we need to replace the bearings or seals. Also, if your bearing is greasable, let's make sure we use a hand-operated grease gun so we don't force grease out of the seals and cause seal damage. Once we check over the rollers, we're going to look at rebuilding our bearings and our seals in the reel and getting it ready for a grind. At the same time, we're going to replace the bed knife and grind that as well so we can marry up the two. Look over the reel assembly for any loose or missing hardware, any damage. Moving on from there, we're going to look at the hydraulic motors. We're going to look for leaking, loose fittings. We're going to look at the hoses for any kind of chafing, rubbing issues. We're going to look underneath the front, look at our lift cylinders if equipped. Let's again look for loose connections, wear in the bushings, any leaks on the seals, anything like that. We're also going to look at our controls. Let's look at our foot pedal. If it's a cable operated, let's see if the cable's frayed, damaged, getting worn out. So we'll look at all that stuff and get it ready for the next season, replace what we need to replace. One good point to show you is the parts and maintenance manual will give you a good listing of items to look at in your winter maintenance based on hours or months. So we'll use that to give us an idea of where to start. So next we're going to go underneath the machine and cover the areas of concern under there. Okay, we've moved underneath the machine. The first thing you're going to notice, we removed the center reel to get us access so we can show you what to look at. First items we're going to look at the wheel motors. Let's see if the wheel motors have any signs of leaking, loose hardware, anything like that. We're also going to pull the wheels. We're going to look at the brakes. Yearly, you should adjust and clean the brakes, make sure they're good to go and the braking system is working correctly. Then we're going to move back underneath. We're going to look at all our hydraulics again, look for leaks, chafing, rubbing, anything of that nature. We're going to look at the center arm pivot, make sure our bushings are not worn. Move it around a little bit. Let's make sure that it's tight and working correctly. We're going to look at the engine. Let's see if we got any leaks on the engine from the rear main seal, the front main seal, coolant leaks, anything like that. We're going to come over to the hydraulic system again, the traction system. We're going to look at our neutral centering device. Let's make sure that it's correct and everything's in good shape. We're going to look at the gear pump. Let's see if we have any leaks on that as well. If you notice, we got a little bit of oil there, so we need to look at the fittings, see if something's loose or damaged. We're going to change our filters. All right, so we'll do our filter changes. Fuel and hydraulic. We'll look at our battery, clean that area, and we'll maintenance the battery once we get up top, and then just give a general look around for any wire issues or anything like that. And then next we're going to move to the back of the unit and cover some items back there that we need to look at. All right, now that we've moved to the back of the unit, let's touch on a few items we need to cover. On this unit, since we have the swing out rear arm, again we're going to look at the bushings, the arm rail, rubbing, chafing on the hoses again. We're going to look at the steering cylinder. Let's see if we got any weeping from the seals. We're also going to look at our ball joints or tie rod ends and see if we got any wear or looseness there. Look at our muffler assembly, make sure it's tight, nothing's broken. Look at our rear wheel motor. Let's see if we got any leaks there. The hardware's tight, fittings and hoses are good. And then we'll walk around to the other side of the unit. Okay, now we're on the opposite side of the rear wheel. We're going to talk about a few items over here of concern. First of all, let's check our wheel lug nut torque and our axle hub torque. Let's make sure they're correct. You know, it's been a year since it's been touched. Also, a big point that nobody talks about is tire pressure. All tires on almost all manufacturers' equipment will come in overinflated for shipping. So if this is the first year of you having this new equipment, let's verify that we have the correct tire pressure per the parts and maintenance manual. Get it back down to where it's supposed to be. You'll notice a better operation and less tire tracks. Okay, moving on, We're going to look up around the back side of the engine. Let's not forget our motor mounts. Let's make sure that we have no damage or loose motor mounts causing any excess vibration. Check our starter connections, harnesses, make sure everything's tight, our alternator connections. Let's look at our valving, hydraulics again for chafing or leaks. We're going to service our coolant system. Let's make sure our overflow tank shows some fluid in there. If there's no fluid in there, we probably had an overheat condition that we might want to look into a little bit more in depth. We're going to service our air filter. One big thing to point out on the air filter system is you have a filter minder which will turn red when your filter is plugged. So let's not over service the filter. Let's let the filter minder do its job and tell us when it's time to service that. Okay, now we'll move on to the top side of the equipment. Okay, now that we're on the left-hand side of the unit, we're going to check a few items over here. We'll start with the battery. Depending on whether it's a maintenance-free or a maintenance battery, we're going to remove and clean the terminals. As you can see, we got a little bit of corrosion here. Good idea to replace the hardware. We're going to check the water level in the battery. Remember, you do not add water if the battery is discharged or not fully charged. You would add just enough water to cover the plates, fully charge the battery, and then top off the battery with water. If you add the water before you charge it, you will actually cause it to overflow and cause you even more corrosion problems. All right, moving on from there, we're going to check the radiator and the oil cooler. We want to pivot. You should be able to unbolt the oil cooler, pivot it out, and we can clean that out with air. Blow out all the debris. Again, blow out the radiator, get it clean. Pull your radiator cap. Let's do a pressure test on it. Make sure the cap is working correctly. We want to go ahead and do a coolant flush and fill. Then we want to move up and check all our caps for our hydraulic tanks and our fuel tank. Remember, on the hydraulic tank, we want to fill to at least 1 inch below the filler neck or to the full mark on a dipstick, and that is always going to be a cold level. We want to leave that 1 inch for expansion once the oil heats up. If you fill up to the top of the neck, once it expands, it's going to go out over the machine. So be ready for that. Make sure the breather on the cap is working correctly. Look for any signs of oil weepage or anything saying that you have an issue there. For a vented cap, we would want to make sure that the vent's working on the fuel tank. If it's a non-vented cap due to an external vent, then we just want to make sure that the O-ring's in there to seal the cap and all that good stuff. Okay, next we're going to move on to the engine compartment, and we'll do that now. All right, now we're in the engine compartment. Some items we want to look at in here. We would start by replacing our belts. So any of your belts, you know, that are frayed or damaged, or if they're ready for their change interval, let's go ahead and get the belts changed out. Tension them correctly. Again, your manual should tell you the correct deflection on that belt. We're going to come to the engine. We're going to change the fluids and filters. We're also due for a valve adjustment. I would recommend you do a compression test on your engines to see where the engine's at in its life. If we have any issues with leakage in the cylinders, leakage through the valve train, anything like that. Always remember, if you do your compression check, you would want to readjust your valves after the compression check and see if that changed anything. That'll let you know if it was the valves that was causing the leak down or if you actually got a cylinder issue. Okay, moving on from there, we're going to change our fuel filters. Check our fuel pump, make sure that the routing's good, no leaks or anything. Again, check hoses for leakage or loose fittings, anything like that. We're going to look over the engine, see if we got any problems with exhaust leaks or anything like that. Again, hose routing is always a major concern. The electrical connections, make sure everything's stored out of the way or clear of any objects. Last, we would come up to the rear wheel. Again, here is our spindle nut that holds the rear wheel on. We want to make sure that that's not loosened up or been messed with. Any signs of damage to the bearings or anything like that, go with your manual and tell you how to adjust that and get the correct settings. All right, moving on from there, we're going to do the control system. All right, we've moved up to the operator platform. We're going to discuss the areas up here. We'll start with the ROPS. Let's make sure we check the ROPS, make sure the hardware's tight, no damage is visible to the ROPS. Remember, do not add anything to the ROPS, such as lights or anything like that, where you'd have to do any drilling or anything, because that will void the warranty of the ROPS. by the manufacturer, unless it is an OEM component that they authorize you to put on. Moving on to the seat, we want to verify the seat's in good condition, our seat switch is operating correctly. In the parts and maintenance manual or your service manual will be a procedure for you to check the interlock circuit. This is where we check all the safeties to make sure everything's operating correctly, and the unit will shut down if you were to lift off the seat in low mode or something like that. So let's make sure we test that circuit. We're going to move to the parking brake. Let's go ahead and adjust our parking brake, make sure it's working correctly. If you remember earlier, we went ahead and did the brake adjustment and cleaning on the shoes herself. So now we're going to adjust the parking brake cables to get them correct. We're going to adjust and check our throttle lever. We're also going to come up to our controls. Let's make sure our joystick's operating correctly. Our switches are functioning correctly. Our lights are working. Hour meter is in operating condition. Okay, your warranty is tied to your hour meter as it is tied to time or months of service. Okay, we want to make sure that when we key on, everything fires up like it's supposed to. We also would want to look at our 1-2 switch if equipped for transport/mow. A lot of you know that once we pull out of transport mode into mow, it should reduce the engine speed and not the engine speed, the transport speed for mowing. So let's make sure nobody's tampered with that and played with that switch. All right, we're going to look at our controller connections, make sure they're all good and tight. This would also be a good time for you to contact your dealer. Let's see if there's any updates or repairs that need to be done to your unit. You could check with them to see if it is if your serial number is in that range. So it'd be a quick call to them to find out. All right, this is pretty much the end of the inspection procedure. One thing to remember is we can do this inspection on new equipment, certified pre-owned, provided by the manufacturer, or any old equipment you have in your barn. Again, this list is not all inclusive. There's a lot of other items you might want to check, or you may be required to check depending on the age of the machine. So I'd like to thank you for joining in. If you need any other information, please contact Jacobson Technical Support, and thank you for joining.